Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to a rural community in southern New Brunswick, Canada. Beaubassin East is a small dot of a town surrounded by rural acreages and dense pockets of forest. The elevation of the rolling topography is very low at 89 feet above sea level. The climate here is a humid continental climate with mild summers and cold, snowy winters. The mixed forests here have a balance of soft and hardwood trees, as well as evergreen and deciduous trees. Balsam fir, jack pine, tamarack, and spruce trees combine with white and yellow birch, sugar and red maple, and beech trees to form an emerald tapestry with dazzling fall colors. Moose and white-tailed deer wander the forest browsing their ways through meadows and ponds. Predators here eke out a meager living and include bobcats, coyotes, and black bears. In the month of April 2022, 50-something Paul Williams had been encountering a problematic sow black bear near the woods on his property. Paul was an ambulance attendant for the Moncton City Hospital and has lived on his property with his wife for 28 years. He ran a handyman business on the side and gathered wood pallets as materials on his property. Paul and his wife recently decided to sell their home as a strained relationship with a neighbor had come to a head. On Paul's neighbor's property, trash from the home was being left out in the backyard. Black bears had begun visiting the property, and Paul knew this spelled danger. Dialogues with his neighbor went nowhere, so Paul and his wife decided they would find a different place to live. Over the past week, Paul had seen a black bear sow and her cubs making their way through the woods behind his home and eating from the neighbor's trash. He had never seen a bear near his home prior to his neighbor leaving his trash out, and now was regularly spotting them as he cleaned up his property before putting it on the market. On April 19, 2022, Paul once again saw the sow and her cubs. A light breeze was carrying his scent directly toward the sow. As Paul moved wood pallets, the massive sow stood to her hind legs and sampled his scent on the breeze. He estimated she stood around 8 feet tall and weighed in at around 450 pounds. As soon as the sow saw Paul, she dropped to all fours and slowly crept toward him with her head low. She purred at him as she approached, which is a sound bears use when they're nervous or irritated. Paul reasoned the sow was upset that he was so close to her cubs and dialed 911 to summon help. It was then that the wind shifted toward Paul instead of away from him. The sow lost his scent and seemed to be less concerned about his presence. Her cubs were gathered up and the bears disappeared back into the woods without incident. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Paul dashed back toward his home and waited for officers to arrive. Though he was shaken by the close-range standoff with the sow, Paul knew he still had a lot of cleanup to do on his property. On April 21st, he returned to the pallet pile near the woods and began sorting things out there once again. After a few hours of work, Paul noticed the sow had returned to the same location of their previous confrontation. Deciding to retreat slowly, he made his way back to his home and called the Department of Natural Resources, who immediately delivered a baited culvert trap to his property. A few hours after the culvert trap was set up, Paul decided to continue cleaning his property. It isn't clear if it was the scent of the bait in the culvert trap or the trash in his neighbor's yard, but soon the sow and her cubs reappeared in the woods near Paul. Upon seeing Paul, the sow slowly stalked toward him from the brush. The man gave ground and tried to scare her away by yelling and waving his arms. He tried to look as big as he could as he searched for a place to hide from her. That is when he remembered the knife in his pocket. He stuffed it in there to cut branches while he worked and hoped it may help him fend her off. As she approached within a few feet, Paul took up a defensive stance. The sow quickly swatted him across the forehead and forearm, ripping open half-inch deep gashes in his flesh. By now, Paul had slowly retreated near a building. He pulled one of the wood pallets up over himself to use as a shield against the sow and hoped she would give up on her attack on him. As the sow pawed and bit at the wood pallet, Paul saw an opportunity to stab her with the knife he now held in his hand. He plunged the blade all the way into her side, and she jerked in response. Being stabbed in the side apparently brought the sow out of attack mode. She glanced around to find her cubs, then disappeared into the woods with them, leaving Paul bloodied and battered, but alive. As blood seeped out of the gash in his forehead and poured out of several on his forearm, Paul made his way back to his home. He rummaged through the medicine cabinet and retrieved a few gauze bandages to treat his own wounds. Once his wounds were bandaged, he checked into the hospital to get preventative treatment for infection. The sow's reactions to Paul's presence were likely the result of two factors. Bringing her cubs to a food source is a risky move, as she could expose them to a boar who might kill them, so she likely was in a protective mood due to that. Add in the possibility that she didn't want to share her food, and you might understand why she was aggressive. She would give her life to protect and nurture her cubs, and no man or beast would prevent her from it. Speaking of cubs, our Cub Tier membership on Patreon, linked below, will give you ad-free early access to our episodes, and the $3 per month goes a long way in helping me continue to produce educational and entertaining content like this. Following his attack, Paul indicated that he doesn't feel safe anymore on his property. The bear's growl still haunts his sleep, and the mirage of her face materializes in the bushes. He states he can still see her face, her teeth, the beast. New Brunswick hosts at least 17,000 black bears over its 28,354 square miles of territory. That is one black bear for every 1.67 square miles, which is a very high population density. Despite having so many black bears, there has never been a human fatality from a bear attack in the province. New Brunswick has a spring and fall bear hunting season and is one of a handful of places that allows bear baiting to harvest bears. Given the higher number of bears, hunters have lobbied the government to extend hunting seasons to maintain balanced populations. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. If bears are afraid of humans, why did the sow continually bring her cubs to Paul's property? Do you think the sow's attack on Paul was predatory or defensive? Who do you think had the right-of-way? Was it Paul's job to steer clear of the sow and her cubs, or was it the sow's job to avoid him? I'll gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.